In Sudan, almost 1,500 soup kitchens closed in a single week. In Uganda, HIV patients were turned away from clinics mid-treatment. In Pakistan, a tuberculosis program serving 15 of Sindh's most undeserved districts was terminated overnight. In Afghanistan, 9 million people lost access to health and protection services simultaneously. All of this happened because in January 2025, the US suspended the overwhelming majority of its global foreign assistance. The architecture that half the developing world had been built around also began to collapse. Now the key questions are, what comes next and who decides? The US was funding nearly 40% of the global humanitarian assistance. USAID alone, for over 20 years, is estimated to have saved 92 million lives. The programs it ran touched tuberculosis control in South Asia, famine response in Horn of Africa, maternal health in Sahel, and civil society development across Southeast Asia and Latin America. When the funding disappeared, it left mid-treatment patients, half-built clinics, partially trained workforce, and dependent institutions with no transition plan and no replacement in sight. But America was not alone in retreating. The UK slashed its aid budget from 0.5% of national income to 0.3%. Germany cut billions as part of its Artistry program. France, Switzerland, and Netherlands all followed. The global humanitarian funding gap that is already $24 billion in 2024 widened dramatically in 2025, thus producing what the UN called the worst humanitarian year on record. So who fills the vacuum? The honest answer in 2026 is no one. At least not at scale and not without conditions. Gulf states have grown into significant donors, but they give bilaterally, selectively, and with their own political and religious priorities shaping every decision. Turkey has expanded its humanitarian footprint, particularly in Muslim-majority regions. However, none of these actors have institutional infrastructure, the geographical reach, or appetite to absorb 40% of global humanitarian spending. China is the most consequential absence in this story. Despite being the world's second largest economy, it contributes a fraction of what Western nations gave to multilateral humanitarian systems. What it does offer flows through the Belt and Road Initiative in the form of infrastructure loans tied to strategic access, not grants tied to human needs. The result is a fragmented landscape where the global south is increasing dependent on donors who are fewer, more conditional, and more ideologically assertive than their predecessors. The consequences are not evenly distributed. Countries such as South Sudan, Somalia, and Afghanistan, where USAID represented between 7 and 9% of entire national income, face economic shocks of a kind that have no peacetime parallel. In Pakistan, 1.7 million people lost access to health services. In Sudan, the withdrawal of food assistance contributed directly to famine conditions. In Sahel, the collapse of nutrition programs arrived alongside accelerating insecurity. What fills ungoverned humanitarian space is never neutral. It is always someone with an agenda, whether that is an armed group, a foreign government, a religious organization, or a private security contractor. The withdrawal of Western aid actually creates a competition. The Global South did not design the aid system. In many ways, it was never an equal partner within it. But the collapse of that system without a successor is simply exposure. Exposure to harder conditions, fewer choices, and more transactional relationship with more powerful actors. The countries that try to cope during this transition best will be those that use the disruption to build genuine institutional capacity, including domestic revenue, local civil society, and regional cooperation. Whereas those that simply wait for the next patron will, as always, find the terms considerably less favorable than before.